My name is Jonathan Barr, and I was wrongfully convicted of a murder and a rape of my friend Katrina Matthews, and I spent almost 20 years in prison for that crime.
I spent 15 years inside of prison.
I spent 11 years and 3 months in prison.
20 years, 9 months, 5 days in prison for a crime I didn't commit.
In the shadows of the justice system, an invisible nightmare lurks. Lives are torn apart, dreams are shattered, and faith in humanity crumbles. What happens when the very system designed to protect and serve condemns the innocent? At what point do you think a story is worth your empathy? This episode sheds light on the top 4 cases of wrongful convictions, guilty until proven innocent. Strap in and dim the lights as we discuss these rough cases, so make sure you stay until the end for these surprising stories. According to a non-profit legal group dedicated to the release of falsely accused persons called the Innocence Project, there have been over 2,800 exonerations in the United States since 1989. Plenty of these involved innocent people sentenced to life in prison, often with no chance of parole. The first case, Anthony Ray Hinton. He was convicted in 1985 of 2 murders committed during robberies in Birmingham, Alabama. Unfortunately, inaccurate witness identification, absurd forensic evidence, and an insufficient legal defense led to his wrongful conviction and death sentence. Hinton spent 28 years on death row before being freed in April 2015, despite taking his appeal all the way to the United States Supreme Court. This case shamefully exposes fundamental problems in the criminal justice system, particularly in situations involving the death penalty. That's 28 years of someone's life down the drain. The second case, Brian Banks. A promising football player, Brian was falsely accused of rape in 2002 by Juanetta Gibson, his former high school acquaintance. Despite his innocence, Banks pleaded guilty to the charges because his lawyer feared a harsher sentence if he went to trial. As a result, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison and 5 years of probation. However, in 2012, Gibson shocked the world by admitting to fabricating the entire story, which resulted in Banks' exoneration. Isn't it mind-blowing how the temptation to accept a guilty plea in fear of greater punishment can bury you alive? The third case, Michael Morton. He was falsely accused of his wife's murder in 1987. Despite the lack of evidence against him and an abundance of proof supporting his innocence, Morton was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. He was not pardoned until an astonishing 25 years later in 2011, thanks to newly discovered DNA evidence linking to a similar Texas homicide case that occurred 2 years after his wife was murdered. Morton's son, Eric, was raised by his grandparents while Morton was in prison, and their relationship inevitably suffered as a consequence. Imagine the pain of someone who lost his wife, then was subsequently robbed of his lifelong right to be there for his son. Not to mention people all around the kid calling his dad a murderer throughout his childhood. You can't help but feel terrible for Morton. The fourth case, Jeffrey Descovich. He was linked to the gruesome rape and murder of a 15-year-old girl. The lady in question was reported missing in 1989 after a photo shoot for a school homework. 2 days later, her corpse was recovered, and Jeffrey Descovich was arrested for the crime. Descovich was found guilty and sentenced to life in jail despite DNA tests proving he was not the source of the sperm detected in the rape kit. He incessantly pleaded for his innocence, sadly to no avail. Descovich was exonerated in 2006, a boggling 17 years after. Hats off to Jeffrey for not succumbing to the temptation of pleading guilty just to cut his losses. As we've journeyed through these gut-wrenching, frustrating stories, we're reminded that a single error can shatter lives beyond repair. Sadly, it's not the prison walls that leave the deepest scars, but the stolen years that could have been filled with love, dreams, and accomplishments are now lost forever. We hope these stories touched your soul and inspired you to stand for justice. If this video has moved you, please like, subscribe, and click that notification bell to join us in uncovering more life-changing truths.